Mine just says iPhone.
All right, so we're live. So hello, everybody. My name is Ryan Dedmon. I'm the Outreach Director for the 911 Training Institute, and I have two very dear friends with me here to celebrate National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week. So with me to the left is Mr. Zach Dykes, a dispatcher in the great state of Missouri, who is also the secretary for the Missouri State Chapter of APCO. Say hello.
Yes. Hi, guys.
Yes, that's all we get from him. And below us both is Miss Halcyon Frank, who's the co-founder of Impact Dispatch.
Hello.
Hello, Halcyon. All right, so here's what we wanted to do. Due to some technical difficulties we were having earlier, and I'll take full responsibility for that, we were going to stream this live on Facebook and hopefully have a lot of people watching and engage their questions and comments in real time. But now we don't have any viewers, so they'll be watching this recording. But the idea is that we wanted to come together and just celebrate National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week. And the idea was, I think Halcyon and I were having a discussion a few days ago because I was looking at some posts on Facebook that I found really interesting from friends and colleagues of mine who worked in 911, and they were talking about how this week, like, it doesn't feel the same because they're not able to, celebrate or participate in a lot of the, activities that they might have otherwise been able to do because of challenges that, the COVID-19 pandemic is presenting. And so then Halcyon and I said, hey, let's just do like a little virtual celebration. We'll do a Facebook Live thing. So here we are. Woo! I wish I could have like confetti falling from the ceiling, but alas, I cannot. So let me ask you both this. So for people who will be watching this, when I was a dispatcher, I didn't really know what National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week was until later in my career. The agency I worked at, a lot of us, they informally called it Dispatcher Appreciation Week. And all that I knew was that during that week, we get a whole bunch of free food and goodies, and that's it. So is the same, how did you guys come to learn about National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week?
You going first, Zach?
Sure.
Yeah, not everyone at once. Please get in line.
Okay, so I'm kind of in the same boat with you. I started back in 2009 as a 911 operator at a small county, and I didn't really know about NPST in whatever, National Public Safety Telecommunicator Week. I can't ever remember the little acronym for that. Anyway, I didn't really start learning about that until I transitioned to my next agency, and I just seem to think that it's becoming more recognized as an actual event than just what it was even 10 years ago when I first started. So I would say that I didn't really start learning about it until it started blowing up on Facebook. And my current agency, I have a lot of contact with really the state, but different regions in the state, and specifically the region I live in and work in. I try to go in and follow as many agencies in my area, and that's when I started really seeing the celebrations that were going on and the people trying to go in and inform their citizens what the week was about and show off their staff and the fun that they're having and the fun that they try to have. Like, I saw an agency today or yesterday posted a Nerf gun war that was going on in dispatch. So,
yes.
So that's kind of where I started learning about this at. So.
How about you, Halcyon? Because aside from being the co-founder of Impact Dispatch, you are also a dispatcher yourself.
Yes. So first of all, I have to say there are other people in my house. So if you see me mouthing things, I'm not talking to myself. There's real people like behind my phone.
Sure.
Okay, this time I'm not talking to myself. So I'm trying to think. I don't think I really knew what it was either. I think back 2014 would have missed it. 2015 maybe. 2016 I think, around there, 16, 17. I think I saw it in like groups, and like then the coworkers I had at the time were a little more of the types who would like engage in that kind of thing and celebrate that kind of thing. Um, I worked with a lot of people who had been there a really long time, so it just wasn't like their thing. But definitely, probably the past at least 2 years, 2 or 3 years, it's been something that like I've done stuff for, and I've had coworkers do stuff for. I've never been in an agency that like the whole agency embraced it necessarily. Um, I see these, the Facebook posts, and they're like, and then we got lunch from this place, and then this thing and this thing, which is super awesome. And I worked for great agencies, but that just wasn't their thing. So it kind of, I've known about it, and there's been stuff amongst me and my coworkers. So probably the last 2 or 3 years for sure. But yeah, I'm like you guys. I didn't really kind of know what it was to begin with.
Yeah, and I didn't even really have an appreciation for it until later in my career. And granted, like when I was working as a dispatcher, people were using social media, but a lot of public agencies hadn't really embraced it to use as an agency entity. And so you only had like individuals who were personally posting about this kind of stuff. So there wasn't, I don't think, quite the social media presence or movement that you see now. And hopefully, I mean, obviously that's helped raise awareness, but what I thought I would do is there's a website created by APCO International, and they kind of share a brief history about what National Public Safety Telecommunicator Week was. And I thought I would read this really quick because it's a pretty cool story. And rather than just reshare it off the top of my head, I wanted to do it justice. So this is from APCO International, and they say every year during the second week of April, the telecommunicators personnel and public safety community are honored. This week-long event was initially set up in 1981 by Patricia Anderson of the Contra Costa County Sheriff's Department, which is in Northern California at the time. And they share this story about how it came about. So in the historic days of dispatch, 911 wasn't fully deployed yet in the United States. Public safety telecommunicators were very much heard, but not ever seen. However, since 1955, the work of administrative assistants, then called secretaries, were celebrated. And in 1981, the last week in April was dedicated to that purpose. At the time, Richard Rainey was the sheriff of the Contra Costa County Sheriff's Department, and he was determined to acknowledge his administrative staff by treating them all to lunch. However, the sheriff actually, this was actually really cool. Call volume must have been pretty low because he loved the idea of phone calls made to his administrative staff and administrative lines at the department. They would always go answered by someone, which means that after hours, after the 9 to 5, so after 5 p.m. when the administrative staff would leave, they would flip a little switch, and then phone calls to those admin lines would then get rerouted and forwarded back to a dispatcher in dispatch. So what happened was, on a regular Tuesday during that week, the sheriff takes his admin staff out to lunch, and at 11 a.m., without even thinking, they flip the little switch to have the lines go forwarded to dispatch. So dispatchers start answering these phone calls, and they found it kind of funny because they thought, these are administrative lines. They shouldn't be forwarded to us because this is still regular working hours, business hours. What's up? So one of the dispatchers marched down to the hall to the admin section and found it a ghost town, completely deserted, like all the lights are off because everyone had gone out to lunch. So 2 hours go by, and at about 1 p.m., admin staff comes back to work. They flip the switch back to have their lines go back. And by this time, dispatchers had figured out what had happened. So Patricia Anderson, who was a veteran dispatcher at the time, she marched down the hall to the sheriff's office, knocked on his door, and basically gave him a piece of her mind. Because for those 2 hours, while everyone else is out to lunch and celebrating, an administrative assistance day, dispatchers are getting hammered by phone calls that are ringing directly to the sheriff's office, but that got rerouted back to communications. So the sheriff apologized profusely, and an hour later, he returned to the communications division with a cake. And he said, "Happy Dispatcher Week." And so then with that move, Sheriff Rainey and Patricia Anderson, and then his undersheriff Rupp at the time, basically initiated a movement that has culminated into what we now call National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week. National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week was actually signed into law in 1998, I believe, by President Clinton. So now it's a national act everywhere in the United States that public safety dispatchers are honored and recognized for their work this week. So I thought that story was pretty cool, because I didn't know there was like a story that went with it. I just thought someone randomly picked this week in April and said, yeah, we're going to call this, this to honor dispatchers this week.
That is pretty
Well,
cool.
if anybody's wondering what I'm like as a dispatcher, I'm Patricia. That's me. I'd be the one that'd be like, what the heck?
You're marching to your sheriff's office. I actually
Yes.
find that story absolutely hilarious too, because I can completely imagine that happening. Like everyone just like, oh yeah, we'll just route these calls to dispatch, flip a little switch,
Yep.
and then everyone leaves, and
No
dispatch
problem.
is left hanging the bag. So now, as we move on, I thought I would share some things that I experienced in my career, and so we always got food, we always got drinks, and that kind of thing. And I don't think it was until I want to say like 2010 when I really started to appreciate what this week meant, because during this week, the Southern California chapter of APCO, which is called the California Public Safety Radio Association, they hold their annual awards banquet to honor dispatchers in this region of Southern California. And in 2010, I believe, a team of dispatchers I was working with during one of our shifts, our team received an award. And so then going to this awards banquet and interacting and networking with a bunch of 911 professionals who work at other agencies in the area, and then coming together to like celebrate the work we did, that's when I first really started to have an appreciation for what this week meant. So is there a point in time that you guys can pinpoint where your understanding and appreciation of what this week was started to change? Just from getting, cookies and brownies and a free meal or doing a potluck to now more of an appreciation of the work that you actually do?
I think when mine, like, as I realized what it was and what it meant, it kind of came at the same time, because at the center I was at, like, it was partially, I guess, my doing that we were celebrating it in the beginning. So I think my appreciation for it kind of started at the same time. I don't know that there was like a separation.
So Zach, what would you say if someone asked you what this week meant to you as a dispatcher? Like, how would you respond to that?
Always love being put on the spot.
Sorry.
So
you can do it.
What it means to me is this is a time that we can come together as an industry and focus on ourselves. It's a time of healing where we can, we all take bad calls. Almost every agency in this entire nation is going to take a horrible call this year. And it's what we do, right? But it's a time of healing because we can kind of come together as an agency or as an industry and focus on recognizing that we are the first responders. We are the thin gold line. We surround our jurisdictions and we support the first responders who go to the scene of those incidents and we're there. We're going to be the voice that's giving them directions on where the victim's at, where the domestic's happening, if there's weapons involved. So we can focus on like recovering from those bad calls, but we can also educate our citizens and educate our friends and our family that, you know, we're true professionals. We don't just sit there with our thumbs twiddling, waiting for the phone to ring and answering it. We're constantly training for these bad calls. We're constantly ready in case something goes bad. And then we have to work through the disastrous results that go to our mental health too. So it's a time of healing and it's a time of celebration, but it's also a time of furthering education for the people who may not realize that what we do.
Now, Halcyon, let me ask you the same question, but you have a unique role because not only are you a dispatcher still wearing a headset, but now you also serve in a role in the private sector in the 911 industry as a trainer and as a speaker. So from that private sector role as a trainer and a speaker, what does National Public Safety Telecommunicator Week mean to you?
I think like Zach said, it's time for that, but it's also kind of just like the time that we get to let loose. Like a lot of centers do, you know, it's looser dress code, it's, you know, cake and fun and dress up and all that stuff. So it is something to look forward to. And so I think even as a private sector, it's just looking at how can we add to that. So even just like doing giveaways or how can we make this week special? Like I think is a big part of it, whatever that looks like or we decide to do, you know, as part of a private sector. It's just how do we make this different from the other weeks?
Yeah, and so that kind of brings us back full circle, right? Is because what you're talking about now is the reason that we were initially trying to do this live streaming broadcast to help dispatchers virtually celebrate because they can't do some of the things that they might otherwise have. So if you had an advice for, say, like a manager or a supervisor on some creative things that they can do to help their dispatchers celebrate this week under the circumstances of being locked down due to pandemic, like what are some ideas that you would have?
I think it goes back to, well, the basics again. How can you make it like set it apart? So can you look at what they're wearing? Can you give them jeans days, a t-shirt day, like make it special? Can you bring in cookies, cakes, and, you know, even is there a way that everybody kind of contributes? Can you do a potluck? Is that even an option? Just, or like, if you can, like small gifts. I think it's you said it, so many acronyms in this industry. The Southern chapter of APCO, they do the buttons. So I was able to get those for my coworkers. So just anything like that, anything that's going to kind of set it apart and make it different from every other week. And even just a card that says thank you can really go a long way. I think just the acknowledgement goes farther than I think people realize. I think the assumption is that like they want a pizza party and they want this and that and everything else. And it's like, I think they just want to be told thank you, like when it really comes down to it.
Zach, are you guys doing anything special at your agency to celebrate?
Not really. I mean, we kind of are. There was our local credit union threw in some money and they're buying all of us dinner at different points throughout the week. So that's pretty much what we're doing, but it's as far as celebration goes, but it's our week. So a lot of our command staff have called in and sent emails, and every time they walk by the window, they stop in and say, hey, happy National Public Safety Telecommunicator Week. Thank you for what you do. And we're having like every other day, all the sergeants are on a conference call with the command staff, and they were told, they're like, hey, make sure that you guys call into radio and let them know that they're appreciated. So
nice. And so Halcyon, coming back to you, I think if we try to refocus and shift our mindsets and how we look at this week, one of your campaign movements on social media, if you will, is what you have called Be an Encourager.
Yes, that's mine.
Tell us more about that.
So I mean, it's a pretty simple concept. Like, it is what it says, be an encourager, whatever that looks like. That looks different for everybody. Um, it's just a reminder like that we need to support each other, because we really do all year long, not just during this week. So um, I don't, it's not anything, I guess, complicated. It's just to support each other, and what ways can we encourage each other. So for that, for some people that's like giving small gifts, this especially this week. For some people that's just kind words, it's a sticky note here or there saying good job. However it is, it looks that you can support other people, or it looks like whatever it looks like for them that they are best supported, just going that route and doing what we can to lift each other up. Because we so much in this industry, we see each other just kind of tearing each other down, and then we go work this job that's incredibly emotionally and mentally taxing at times. So it just compounds. So the more outside of the job we can be encouraging and lift people up, the better we are off when we're actually in the chair working.
Yeah, I love it. And I was putting some feelers out to some friends of mine who have nothing to do with working in any role in public safety. And so I asked them, I said, hey, do you know what this week is? This week is National Public Safety Telecommunicator Week, right? And the blank stares I get. So I'm willing to bet that a majority of the general public still has no idea that this is a week dedicated to 911 professionals. So what are some things, and I find this interesting also because April is 911 Education Month. So I find a lot of agencies starting to try, like Zach, like you said, trying to tie these things together by not just celebrating, but then also doing some like education, outreach, and engagement to raise awareness, not just about your role as a dispatcher, but then, just 911 in general, its proper use, and some general like emergency preparedness tips for personal safety.
Yeah, so I'm going to bring up, just to kind of tie in with what you're saying, if you guys are familiar with Tyrell Morris down in New Orleans, he is very big on outreach right now. He is very big on filming pretty well put together videos and releasing them on YouTube and releasing them as public safety or public service announcements. So I've seen a couple recently this week where his staff and his partner agencies have been releasing these public videos explaining what communicators are doing just regularly, and what training they have to go through, and releasing those on YouTube and their Facebook pages. I've also seen agencies that are doing write-ups for newspapers, and newspapers are picking up on the fact that this is a national week, and they're explaining the situation, and they're explaining what this means. And I think that's going to help further that. So a suggestion would be, if you've got something coming up, do a write-up. Do a write-up on what this week means to your agency, and maybe cover your staff if you can, or cover a portion of your staff and introduce the faces behind the headset. If that's acceptable, that's going to be up to you guys, because I know there's going to be a privacy thing too, especially with larger agencies, but that would be my suggestions.
So Halcyon, if we tell people now that, hey, this is National Public Safety Telecommunicator Week, be sure to celebrate your local 911 dispatchers, and people want to try to do something, what are some things that you recommend that the public try to do for their dispatchers, but also keeping in mind the current challenges we're all facing with COVID-19? Because you're probably not going to be able to deliver food and goodies or do a sit-along like you might have been otherwise able to do.
Yeah, that's a good question, because what do you do? Because the first thing that pops in my mind is like, oh, feed them. We love to be fed. I think even just acknowledgement. So if your agency has a Facebook page and they're putting out a post about it, even when people comment, and like, it's nice to see that people acknowledge it and they're like, yes, thank you for everything you do. and they're not people that you're like friends with or that are friends with your mom, like that's even better because then like they felt no obligation to do it. They just did it. So I think especially this year, that's going to go the longest way because I mean, there's so many restrictions and you can't bring stuff in, but just even commenting or sending a card, or I don't want to say call in because we're already answering the phone. So that's not always ideal either. But, definitely just however you want to do it to get the message that you appreciate them, I think is going to be the best way, especially this year. And that goes for everybody that's working right now through all of this, just extending the thank you can be really beneficial and positive.
Yeah, so when I asked a bunch of 911 professionals on social media, like what they would want the public to do for them, their response wasn't, food, goodies, gifts, or anything like that. It was just like an acknowledgement and then gratitude and appreciation for the work that they do. And that probably ties in a lot to the current battle that dispatchers are facing, trying to get reclassified as a first responder, because traditionally dispatchers haven't been classified as that. They haven't been recognized as that. We've been, glorified telephone operators. But now I think with social media and other different types of campaigns and movements that have all come together, everything is starting to be the perfect storm to where dispatchers are now starting to get some of the recognition and thanks that has been long overdue for the work that they do.
Yeah, I think it's moving along. I will say, kind of going back to the people being aware, I don't, I see a lot of frustrations with, oh, my agency doesn't celebrate that. They don't do anything for us. They don't, and there's other cases, but in some cases, I really think I just want to be like, do they know? Do they know it's dispatch week? Because just like we kind of talked about in the beginning, it's still something that, you have to spread the message. And you guys said you didn't necessarily even know exactly what it meant in the beginning. And I didn't know it was a thing when I first started. So I think public education, or even education with our own departments, is still something to be done.
Yeah. Okay. So then as we wrap up this little celebration, if you will, a couple of things to just recap really quick. If you're a member of the general public, we invite you to find a creative way to reach out and say thank you to the 911 dispatchers who serve at the local public safety agencies where you live or work. And if you're a 911 professional, Zach gave you some great recommendations on some things that you can do internally at your department, not just to raise public awareness, but also to kind of celebrate internally with your peers and your colleagues here. And then the last thing I want to touch on really quick is that also upcoming at the very end of this month is the very first Dare to Be Great conference. And that is being organized by our friend Ricardo Martinez from Within the Trenches podcast. And he has put together a very dynamic all-star lineup of the most elite people in the 911 industry who are going to come together and do a virtual conference because we're still under a lot of these executive stay-at-home orders, and we can't have the public gatherings at a conference in person, and many of those for us in the 911 industry have been canceled anyway. So this is going to be a virtual conference that is completely free to attend. And Halcyon, you are the opening keynote speaker on day one.
I am. Thanks for reminding me.
Is you excited? Is you excited?
I mean, I am, but as my dad reminded me, the opening, if you go to a concert, that's where they put the lesser people, the opening band.
Oh, your dad is savage.
So I'm not mad about it. I want to be the opener because I'm it's like the little old opener, and then everybody else is the main band. But yeah, it's going to be, I mean, it is 3 days full of some of the biggest names in dispatch and some of the best, and it's going to be a good time. And I have a friend making an appearance, but yeah, I'm excited. I'm going to do the Be an Encourager. That'll be the kickoff, 8:30 a.m. and it's all Eastern times. And you can go to the Within the Trenches blog to get registered for that. And you can register for 1 day, 2 days, all 3 days, however it works with your schedule.
Yep. So we would encourage you to find Within the Trenches either on social media or Google them and visit their website. And you can find all the information about the conference and instructions on how to register for that. But it is coming up at the end of this month, April 27th through the 29th for 3 days. And you don't even have to attend all 3 days. You can only register for 1 day at a time. But definitely check out the lineup of people who are scheduled to present and the descriptions on their sessions, because it will be amazing, amazing, amazing. So as we celebrate National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week, I, as a retired dispatcher, would like to thank the both of you for your continued service, because I know both of you are still wearing a headset and sitting behind a console. And I remember those days, and they're certainly not easy. And as you both beautifully articulated, it does take a very heavy emotional, psychological, even physical toll on your body working, serving as a dispatcher. So I hope that the two of you find some way this week to celebrate the work that you're doing for your agencies. And I hope that your agencies also find creative ways where they celebrate you and all of your colleagues serving with you. So with that, people, you can find more information about Halcyon Lee and Halcyon Frank and Impact Dispatch by visiting her website, finding her on social media. The Missouri state chapter of APCO is also active on various platforms of social media, and you can also find the 911 Training Institute active on every channel of social media. So reach out, find us. We'd love to hear from you. We wish you all well. So be safe and carry on the good work, everyone.
Bye, guys.